Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call the Executive Committee meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Good morning, members. If you can please make your selections on your tablets. Chair, we have a quorum with 6 members present and 1 member absent.
Thank you. Let's move to non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who'd like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of the committee. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
Yes, we do. We have 1 public comment. David Roger, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Hello. My name's David Roger. I'm a native San Diegan, only been here 70 years, and lived in downtown San Diego. I've been taking public transit actively for probably 15, 16 years on a daily basis. And I've noticed that the steady decline of MTS and its safety, and living downtown at the Fifth Avenue trolley station, seeing when actually MTS closes down the C Street corridor to do work, that we don't have 100+ people actively consuming and selling drugs in the station, say from midnight till 5 in the morning. We've showed public videos and stuff of this, and it seems as though everybody's really, really outraged, but nothing ever seems to happen. And it was really nice to see Miss Cooney riding actually on the trolley the other day. And I would really like to have your executive all ride the trolley at 1:30 in the morning to the Fifth Avenue trolley station and actually get out and see how safe you feel. MTS has a responsibility to its community. You are the attractant for the Fifth Avenue trolley station drug activity. When the streets close, there is none. It's happened 3 times this year. So I really think all of you elected officials, the public is looking to you to actually make sure that we're safe. And at this point, it doesn't really look like it. And I think MTS has become a real good transporter of drugs and people around the community. Thank you.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
All right, thank you. We will move to approval of the minutes of the September 4th, 2025 meeting of the Executive Committee. Clerk, do we have any public comment on those minutes?
We have no public comments.
All right, we will entertain a motion to approve the minutes. I'll go to Vice Chair Goebel.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Goebel and a second from Director Hall. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, Clerk, please call the roll.
Members, if you can please make your selections on your tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 6 members voting yes and 1 member absent.
Thank you. Let's move on to our discussion items. Item 4 is to consider making a recommendation to the Board of Directors on MTS financial sustainability. We will invite Mike Thompson to provide the presentation.
Good morning, Mike Thompson. I'm the Deputy CFO. I'm joined with Gordon Meyer, our Manager of Financial Planning, and Larry Marinuthi, our CFO. So this is similar to what we brought to the board in the EC last month, just trying to get some general strategic direction on MTS's fiscal sustainability. So in this presentation, we're just looking for general strategic direction for our planning purposes. The goal ultimately is to realign recurring revenues and recurring expenses before our non-recurring revenues that we've been using to balance our budgets are depleted. And there's a significant gap today between those 2 revenue and expense streams. That will take many years and many different initiatives to bridge that gap. So we're looking for guidance for staff to address the structural deficit, beginning with our next round of budget planning for capital and operating budget development cycles. So most of these decisions, it's just general guidance today. Most of these decisions will come back to the board, either whether for the capital adoption, the board budget adoption, or any other actual agenda items. So here's where our current direction lies from the board. It's from last February. There were two different agenda items, and this is the direction the board has given us to date. One is to pursue a comprehensive operational analysis, or COA, begin preliminary efforts on researching the feasibility of placing a transit revenue measure on the 2026 ballot, and then work with Sandaga and North County Transit District to conduct a fare study. And then the other item, there was also guidance to create an ad hoc subcommittee related to the COA and the transit revenue measure. Exercise our innovative clean transit off-ramp provisions to delay the inflation of some purchases of zero-emission buses, allowing us to fund more state repair projects in FY26 CIP primarily. Allow staff to shift flexible funds from the CIP to the operating budget beginning with FY26, and we did shift 25 million in last year's budget cycle. The plan was to shift 35 million with this next budget cycle and then 50 million in the 2028 cycle. And then the last direction was to maintain service levels at January 2025 levels. Originally, our SB 125 spending plan included some additional service increases. Those will have to be deferred as we need to use that money to balance the budget a little bit longer. And the goal of this was to get us through fiscal year 28 with our available non-recurring revenues. So this next slide again is what we presented to the budget with the budget in May. This is our current budget for fiscal year 26 and the projection at that time for 27, 28, 29, and 30. And you can see based on that direction, we are balanced with our one-time non-recurring funding through fiscal year 28. And the thought was we see what happens with the ballot in 26. It gives us time to respond after that. So we wanted to bring this back to the board to sort of update some of this direction, and we've broken it down into four major components. The first decision point is really the revenue measure. The original plan was to look at taking something to the November 2026 ballot. That is seeming to be unrealistic at this point due to the timing being your way, and also who would carry that for us on the 2026 ballot and support us with that. So based on that, we feel this should be pushed back to 2028, give us more time to prepare, more time to build support. We do need this recurring revenue stream to balance not only our existing operating structural deficit, but also to allow us to expand service in the future and do significant expansion projects and infrastructure improvement projects as well. And doing a revenue measure would also allow the public to have a say before we significantly change service levels. So if yes is the answer here, we would plan to pursue a November 2020 ballot measure. We would continue the COA, signature options, and public outreach around what they would like to see in that ballot measure. And then if that was ultimately approved by the public in November 2028, we would probably begin receiving revenues in 2030. So to be able to make it that far, we need to sort of have a new plan to balance our operating budget through 2030 in order to give that time to all take place. So that's 2 years longer than we actually are balanced today. It would be an initial $265 million that we need to balance through 2030 if we wanted to pursue this method. I mean, we don't have to do that. We can just not plan for a revenue measure. It seemed there was some direction that way, but we still have 3 years of balancing in place. We would still need to do the COA next spring and figure out how we can balance that budget starting in 2029. All the following decision points after this will still be required, looking at external funding, looking at what we do with capital, and then all the non-service operating budget changes we'll talk about future. We'll still need to do all that if this was the direction still. The FAIR study will be presented to the MTS board in the spring, and then we can begin planning now to align our recurring revenues and recurring expenses to right-size the system in advance of fiscal year 2029. And then again, board action for the COA and the FAIR study is not today. It's for future board meetings in the spring. The second decision point is around the capital improvement program, or CIP. We already talked about this, that the board previously approved shifting 35 million in 27 and 50 million in 28. Well, to get through another couple years, we really need to increase this from 35 in 27 to 50 in 27, and then 50 million in 28, 29, and 30 as well. So Again, we're not asking for specific project decisions today. Those will be made annually with the approval of the annual budget. We would still have approximately $90 million for capital improvement program each year to maintain our system as well as we could. We would still have the opportunity to aggressively pursue competitive state and federal grant opportunities that could also help us with these funding challenges. And then this is sort of recognition regardless of what we decide on the ballot measure. These dollars need to be shifted to be able to get us to a more balanced system. At last meeting at the board, they wanted some additional clarification on what type of stuff this could mean. Primarily, this would impacts both our electric bus transition as well as our stadium repair. But starting with the electric bus transition, we would continue to delay our ICT implementation. We have funded the first phases of overhead charging systems at IED and KMD. There's no change to that. We will continue to complete those projects with the funding that's already been identified. We will also purchase battery electric buses for those two divisions once those charging overhead systems are completed. The IED battery electric buses will be purchased next year with existing low carbon transit optimization program funding that's already been allocated to that project. Then KMD would be purchased with future funding, both from the LCTOP as well as the Senate Bill 125 Zero Emission Transit Capital Program funding. So that we'd still do battery electric bus transition items that have already been in place, but we wouldn't do any future items. We wouldn't start with South Base Phase 2 or then Phase 2 for either IED or KMD or even Phase 1 for East County. So all that would be dependent on further either competitive or dedicated funding from the state to complete additional projects from here on out. It also would be, we also use future funding for BEVs or for the Clean Transit Advancement Council. We wouldn't fund any more of that based on our recurring revenues. On the stated good repair, Orange Line project will be fully funded. We funded most of it already. We have a couple more years of funding on that, but that will not change with this direction. We will still continue to look at our revenue vehicle purchases as the next thing that we fund. We will be reducing the number of buses replaced with the next order as we reduce our fleet slightly. So there will be some savings impacting the 2027 CIP already based on those decisions. And then outside of those battery electric buses I just talked about for IMD, KMD, we would assume all future purchases would be natural gas that saves $500,000 per bus going forward as well. We'd also look at extending the current fleet useful life above the 12 years we currently use today to see if we can have further reductions to the number of bus vehicle replacements in the next few years. We would also delay our 3,000 trolley series replacement project. It's about a $55 million project that we will begin to start saving for next fiscal year was the plan, but we'll just delay the replacement of those 11 vehicles that are currently approaching their end of their useful life. The remaining capital funds would go towards stated good repair projects up to what the constrained budget numbers would be each year. And we would sort of revise our prioritization criteria around stated good repair. We've always looked at when things get to the useful life, we want to replace it, at that point before it can start causing problems. But now we're going to have to be much more judicious about that and look at not only is it at the end of its useful life, does its current require replacement at this point in time, or could that last for a year or two? So we'll look at that as well. We'll also look at the way we fund these projects. If in the past, if we had a $3 million project, we would fund that $3 million project when the need arose, but we can look at how much of that is really going to be spent in the next year and maybe fund it 1.5 and 1.5 the following year and really look at that when the money's going to be spent to make this money last a little bit longer.
Mike, could I stop you here for a second? I wanted to make a point. So on the state of good repair, clearly you don't want to continue to defer these projects, but one of the big drivers for our capital improvement program for state of good repair is replacement of buses. In the event that we fail to achieve more revenue in the system and we have to make major cuts to service, then we won't need those buses anymore. So if they're too old, we'll scrap them. And so basically we're just trying to get ourselves to that point, that 2030 horizon, and then we'll either be able to continue to buy new buses after that, or we will be getting rid of a significant portion of our fleet. So that's why we've included state of good repair. While this board has never really wanted us to get too far deep into not keeping up with state of good repair. In this instance, it's a very small horizon. So.
Yeah, and we're very cognizant of the fact that once you fall behind on state of good repair, it gets very hard to get caught back up. So we have to manage that a little better, but we still need to maintain our system in a state of repair. And it's like we mentioned last month, we feel our system currently is in a very good state of good repair. So we do have a little bit of time where we can do this again in the short term. Also, I mean, we're not making project decisions today. The CIP would come back to the board in the spring, and you can look at those actual recommendations at that point in time. The third decision point is around the operating budget and looking for non-service operational budget savings. We do have some favorable FY25 trends that we'll be carrying forward in the next forecast we put together. We will continue to aggressively pursue all non-fair revenue opportunities, including naming rights, billboards, and any other advertising type opportunities. We will look to fund only essential repairs and services in the upcoming budget development cycle. Anything new or any nice to have things, we would defer until we get into a more stable position. We talked about this last month, but there are some opportunities on the San Diego Transit Corp self-funded pension plan. One is changing the UAL amortization over 20 years versus today's being done in 2037, or even changing the discount rate from today's 6%, excuse me, to either 6.25 or 6.5. Those type of options could save $5 to $7 million per year, but it just extends that payback period into the future past 2037. We'll bring the actual report back to the board in February for consideration, but we just wanted to get your thoughts on those ideas. We're looking for a goal of $10 million in annual operating savings, beginning with this next budget development cycle, not including anything with service. And then again, this would come back to the board during the budget development cycle next spring. The last decision point is external funding. There's no recurring revenue funding sources on the horizon. There are no proposals to increase the TDA formulas for transit. The extension of cap and trade last month, it was approved by the governor, preserves the status quo. So there's no new formula funding. It just keeps the same level of competitive funding that has been in the past. And right now, there's no other new federal or state recurring revenue sources on the horizon that we're aware of. We have had discussions with Sandag, and we will continue to have discussions with Sandag. Both the things they propose so far are borrowing initiatives where we get some cash up front, but then we have to pay it back down the line with our formula Transnet funding. So we're not recommending that today, but as we get closer to those dates in 2030, this might be something we need to look at. The Transnet advances. There's no flexible Transnet available on Sandag's side. It's all been programmed. So we would bond against our recurring revenue stream and then pull money in forward. That would have to be paid back with interest, and it'd have to be used for capital purposes. And the other one is regional federal funding advances. That requires partners and payback agreements. And again, it also has to be used on capital as well. That makes the use of it a little more challenging because we need to balance the operating budget. So we are continuing to look for all these things, and we continue to do that. Regarding service and fares, I mean, what we've presented so far will not balance the budget through 2030. We still need additional savings or revenues to get there. But we're not requesting any specific additional direction today, as we do have two initiatives underway already that we let those complete, and then we still have time to really figure out what needs to happen for 2030 versus the comprehensive operational analysis that's in place. We won't have any major service changes until that is complete. We will continue to review our service efficiencies in the short term, and at our three times a year, we shake up services under policy 42. And I'll talk more about policy 42, what is a major service change and minor service change in the next couple of slides. So when that COA process is complete next spring, that will be brought back to the board, and decisions will be made then around what service needs to be. The fare study is in progress based on board direction from February. So Sandag is currently in the middle analysis phase of that project. There will also be a public outreach phase, and then 4 recommendations put together, and that will be brought back separately to the board in the spring as well. So those decisions are already underway. We don't need any decisions on either of those today, We just want to bring that up. And at the last meeting, there was some question about Board Policy 42, so we just wanted to do a quick explainer here. This is the board policy for evaluating and adjusting existing transit services to improve performance. It establishes procedures for implementing service changes and adopted the vision. The adopted vision is for a customer-focused, competitive, integrated, and sustainable system. Then performance indicators are listed in the policy and are analyzed with performance targets established and reviewed on an annual basis. So the difference in the policy that makes a distinction between major service changes and minor service changes. So major changes will require public hearing and board adoption. This is any time a route weekly in-service miles changes by more than 25%. This is when we have significant route realignment, scheduling changes, or restructuring, and it may result in reduction of benefits for some riders. Minor changes do not require public hearing or board adoption. This is when the change to a route's weekly in-service miles or hours is less than 25% of their overall total. So it's minor routing adjustments, service maintenance, and optimization of service. And usually these do not have a significant impact to ridership. So we just want to make clear those distinctions. Major service changes is something we bring back to board. That's what the COA is looking at. Minor service changes is what we do on an annual basis, and 3 times a year make minor adjustments to our service levels. So with that, it brings us to the staff recommendation is that the executive committee forward a recommendation that the MTS board of directors provide the following direction to staff. Move target for a revenue measure from November 26th to November 28th. During the development of the FY 27 through 30 capital improvement programs, include a shift of $50 million per year to the operating budget. Set a goal of $10 million in annual operating savings, beginning with the fiscal year 2027 operating budget. That does exclude service changes, and then continue pursuing additional funding from regional, state, and our federal sources. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do have one. Maria Cortez, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Hello, good morning, and thank you, everybody here. I would like to say that I agree. Oh my God, I'm agreeing with MTS. That I agree with the staff recommendations. The only thing is, I'm sad to say about the trolley. Jesus, been waiting for that purple line. I'm not going to be alive, but I just want to say that I agree with the staff recommendations today, and I want to thank the staff for giving us this opportunity to come and speak about this, because a lot of people don't really realize. That's why I keep telling them they need to become involved and come here and speak how they feel. So I just want to say thank you for the recommendations, and I support it. Thank you.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Cortez. And it was your input, together with the input of some other riders who and members of the board who led us to make some of the adjustments that you see in the staff recommendation today. So thank you for all that input. Let's open committee member discussion on the item. We're going to begin with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Nice presentation. Thorough. Thank you again. I think what would be helpful for the board to know in a couple of weeks is what other agencies are doing and what Sacramento and the federal are discussing, at least. These discussions we're talking about today are in a vacuum of just us. But in a way, we are tied to other agencies as well. And I think for the board to have a full understanding of the industry and the mutual challenges, not just our challenges, that might help frame our thinking. If we know it's not just us, other people will have to solve this problem too. That would be, I think, a slide or two that should be added for the board's presentation.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand that the funding streams for all agencies are completely different. So for instance, SEPTA is funded heavily by the state, and it's a partnership, and they constantly have to go to the state and say, can you up our budget? Can you up our budget? But they're also doing massive service cuts were in the works before a judge told them they couldn't continue. And they had a major fare increase. Dallas, another one that's heavily funded by the state. They also, though, made massive service cuts in order to get the state to go ahead and fund their budget more. So it just depends on the even within state. You know, I was at the Transit Transformation Task Force. The final meeting was on Tuesday. I fought hard to try to get an increase of the TDA, which is the quarter-cent sales tax that helps us fund our system today. I wanted it to get increased to a 0.5 cent, and the Bay Area all fought against it. The administration was against it, and so it failed. And that is because BART does not get TDA funding, and they wanted a different way to help fund their system. So even within our state, we have different funding streams that make it challenging to explain too much about why, but ultimately service cuts and fare increases are a part of that mix for every agency that I've talked with. I know that at APTA, the annual meeting, I don't know if anybody, I know from people who went to the meeting, they had a whole panel on what people are doing to try to balance their budget. And it's primarily massive service cuts, big fare increases, and a lot of the measures that we're trying.
When
Here.
you were talking massive rate increases, what are you talking?
I'm trying to remember what SEPTA increased theirs to. Does anybody recall? $20 a month? Oh, 20%.
And what's SEPTA?
I'm sorry, that's in the Pennsylvania area, Philadelphia area. That's their Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority. I think that's what it's called. But it's the very large transit system in that part of the state of Pennsylvania.
And I appreciate knowing what others in the country are doing. I'd probably clarify my comments would be for California agencies, because we don't have access or competition per se with Pennsylvania or Dallas. We have competition within California. For instance, if BART says we don't get any TDA, they're probably going to get some TDA before we get more TDA.
Well, what they're planning to do is they're going to go to the ballot in 2026 for a 14-year measure to try to help them fund their system. And then they're getting a loan from the state of California to also stretch it so that they can get to that 2026 ballot.
And this is good to know, because maybe they have an idea that we should be thinking about is kind of where I'm going with this intra-California industry recognition. I realize we're all not the same formula, but within California, we are competing for the same transit dollars. And somehow the state is going to have to make all of us work and not one of us go under. So I come back to, it'd be nice to know what other intra-California agencies are doing to give us an idea. We should apply for that. We should, everybody else is looking at this but us, kind of a thing. That's kind of where I'm getting a macro view of California.
Yeah, and the final report for the Transit Transformation Task Force is due to the legislature by the end of this month. So we'll have a copy of that. But ultimately, we looked at every possible funding scenario that could happen at the state level and discussed every one of those options. Ultimately, there was nothing put in there that would be a panacea for everyone. It was little things that would, for instance, you can borrow money from the FHWA, but you have to pay it back with interest and within a certain number of years. So for us, that would be akin to what we have been offered from Sandag. So we could borrow from Sandag for the same reasons that Mike mentioned. It's not ideal because you have to pay it back with interest. And so that ultimately puts you in a worse position if you don't get a revenue measure in the near future. So it's a lot of different pieces. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Thank you, CEO Cooney. Let's go to Director Fernandez.
Appreciate it. I also agree with Vice Chair Gold that it's good to have these discussions, but I think I'd rather see what other agencies are doing. I know, or at least I read that SFMTA, they have actually created a revenue work group that doesn't just include their board of directors, but also includes their board of supervisors and other governmental bodies that have an invested interest in public transit. And so, again, would just like to repeat, I would like to see what those solutions are for those other agencies. I agree.
Thank you, Director Fernandez. Let's go to Director Hall.
I just have a quick question. I know that in the last meeting, we had a 10% increase in revenues. And this time it's try and save $10 million. Have we given up totally on the 10% or what's the story on that? Because we have, frankly, I'm fine with the 20% if we need to, because we got to stay in business, bottom line.
We took that out of this staff recommendation because it's already in process as part of the FAIR study that Sandag is looking at. So that will come back to the board as part of the FAIR study, the analysis being done by Sandag and the public outreach they're going to do.
And
so
remind me when that was due.
It's be done in the spring sometime.
Okay.
All right. This one will go to Director Ela Rivera next.
Apologies, Chair. And also, I'm happy to wait and hear what you have to say. I'm not trying to get ahead of you. Okay. I just some thoughts because we don't have a motion on the floor yet, correct? I appreciate staff hearing the feedback from our previous meeting from both the public and the board. I think that's important. I see that and appreciate it. There's a couple of things that I would like to see. I think it's maybe part of this. I don't know if I'd say it in addition to or in part of. Starting with the first point around moving the target for the revenue measure. We talked about this a little bit last year, but the runway was short. And I think what we are, in my mind, what we're doing is not punting on 2026, but instead building a runway that allows us to build a more effective coalition. And in doing that, I also think there's an opportunity to expand the ways in which we can pursue revenue at the state level. I know that we're very limited right now, but as the conversation with Member Goebel was referencing, this is a statewide issue. And I think that one of the hesitancies that some of us have in terms of pursuing revenue, there's the threshold for sure, and whether or not it would succeed, but it's who's carrying the burden of the increased taxes that we would need. And I would very much like to see MTS help lead a statewide effort to expand the types of revenue streams that we can pursue with an emphasis on tourists. Happy to workshop that more, but I think it's just something that we have to try to do. I think we can build a broader coalition. I would imagine that we can build a greater consensus on this board if rather than sales tax, which would be impacting not just residents with lowest income residents the most. And if that doesn't work out, that doesn't work out. But it would also feel like we're missing an opportunity if we don't use the expanded runway to see what else can be on the playing field. Sharon, you are a leader at the state level amongst transit agencies. And again, if we're kind of adding a new potential stream that isn't necessarily in conflict with the sorts of revenue that cities and counties are often looking to pursue, I just feel like there might be something there. I don't have all the fine points off the top of my head for sure, but if we could add something about maybe it's as a sub point to one, MTS pursue state legislation to expand the types of revenue streams with an emphasis on either tourism or luxury vehicles. So I think that there's probably something there as well in terms of adding a fee for luxury vehicles that could potentially resource MTS in a significant way.
Yeah, and I think so a tourism tax of some sort or a fee. We also discussed at the advisory committee parcel tax, giving transit agencies the ability to implement a parcel tax. And there's some other ones as well. And we did have legislative staff in the meetings with us, hearing that we were looking to get these additional rights to pursue other funding streams. That should end up in the final report. But again, we won't get that till the end of the month.
Okay. And then, if we can kind of building that into our legislative agenda, legislative platform, the hotel thing, it doesn't necessarily need to be TOT, because again, then we're in competition with cities and there'd probably be issues there. I'm thinking things like a per night fee on vehicles parked at hotels. It could be a percentage of the fee that's charged. I think there's something there. And I see multiple policy upsides to that. If we are charging tourists to drive in San Diego, we're either going to get revenue from that, or we're going to encourage them to support the system as riders. So there's kind of a win-win there. So I don't want to belabor it. I want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity and it gets late quickly with these sort of things. So I'll stop there, Chair, and kind of curious of where you want to take it from a motion standpoint. The last thing, sorry, as I'm thinking out loud here, we've got additional funding from regional, state, and or federal sources, and maybe this has just been so included in other conversations that we've had and other actions that we've taken that it doesn't feel necessary to include here. But the additional sources of revenue here at the local level, I know we're pursuing that through billboards as an example. We've had the conversation about, what sort of opportunities for large scale solar projects might there be to either offset our costs or bring in lease revenue. So I just want us taking the widest view possible in terms of pursuing revenue that isn't going to be felt by riders, especially our lower income riders. I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Can I repeat back the language for the revenue measure just to make sure that it's accurate? Okay. I wrote it down as MTS to pursue state legislation to expand transit revenue options focused on tourists, luxury vehicles, and other options besides a sales tax.
Okay. And was your intent to make that a motion or what? Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Do we have any further discussion on this item?
Just a bit more.
Director Fernandez.
Yeah, so, as we continue to have these discussions for the next few years, I suppose, again, it would be helpful to see these things, see this information, and I can't believe it. I think I'm probably asking for yet more slides to the slide decks here. When it comes to SGR, I would like to see some kind of maybe like a risk register with our top 20 assets, something like that. I'm just throwing that number out there. And in terms of revenue, whether it be like marketing and billboards and such, if we could see some kind of monetization deck provided to us of the projects that we have proposed for sponsorship, advertising, and such, it'd be helpful to see that information. I don't know how far in the weeds this board wants to get, but it seems like we got some really tough decisions ahead of us. So in this case, maybe more information is better.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll go ahead and make a motion with number 4, Director Eler Rivera, your comments could be spelled out if we say continue pursuing additional funding for regional, state, federal sources, including, and then what Karen just read off. That would make your things specifically included to be, as well as anything else the staff feels good. I'd be glad to go ahead and make a motion if that includes your thoughts. So moved.
Okay. Very good. We have a motion from Vice Chair Goebel. And if your You want to second it? Okay, so that is seconded by Director Elo Rivera. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, and so then just to repeat, the motion, it is items 1, 2, and 3, and item 4 inclusive of the recommendation from Director Elo Rivera. Okay, seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the vote.
We're just trying to put the revised motion up on the screen.
Sure, go ahead and take your time. And Director Fernandez's point was well taken about the more information on this stuff, obviously it's of interest to the executive committee and the board. So we're happy to dive in a little deeper as these conversations continue. Okay, the recommendation, the motion is on the screen. If everybody is comfortable that that captures what was discussed, then let's go ahead and vote.
Members, if you can please make your selections on the tablet. The motion passes with 5 members voting yes, 1 member voting no, and 1 member absent.
Very good, thank you. Item number 5 is to make a recommendation to the board of directors on the election of a chair and vice chair, and Karen Landers will have details on this item.
Okay. All right. We're gonna make sure I know the new. Okay. So it's that time of year, or every 2 years again, that under our enabling legislation and a board policy 22, the board elects a chair for 2-year terms. And in the past several years, we've elected the chair and the vice chair together. And so both Chair Whitburn and Vice Chair Goebel's terms expire in December of 2025. And just to remind you of what the board ultimately will vote on the chair, it requires a 2/3 vote or 10 votes minimum. It's a 2-year term, but the executive committee makes the recommendation to the board. So it starts here. Under board policy 22, it provides that prior to the expiration of a chairperson's term, that the executive committee shall make a recommendation to the board on whether to re-elect the current chairperson. So that's the starting point that the board put forth in policy 22. So staff reached out to Chair Whitburn and Vice Chair Goebel to see if that was something that they were interested in having the executive committee discuss. I'm sure they can speak for themselves, but they did indicate that they're both, interested and willing to continue to serve for the 2026-2027 2-year term. So what we've brought to the board, the committee today, is discuss whether or not it wants to make that recommendation to the board, because that would be the next step. We would either prepare an item with that recommendation, or then the alternative is that the board would basically deem not to make that recommendation and follow a different process. So our recommendation is that you all discuss what you want to, what recommendation the executive committee wants to make to the board of directors.
Very much. Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay, we will go ahead and open committee member discussion on the item. We'll begin with Director Hall.
I'll make the recommendation that 2 Stevens stay in their current positions.
Thank you, Director Hall. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Is there a second?
I'll second. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Director Elo Rivera. All right, we have a motion from Director Hall. We have a second from Director Elo Rivera. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, if you can please make your selections on your tablets. We still have one.
Chair, while we're waiting, I just wanted to say I appreciated, I think you stepped into a tumultuous situation, and things were rocky for the agency in that moment. We certainly have significant challenges as an agency that we need to still deal with. And there's significantly more stability there was when you entered into your chairmanship. So I wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership that you've provided. Vice Chair Goebel, you definitely offering steady leadership as well. And I think with you two, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp, we've done pretty well considering what we were dealing with. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much, Director Elo Rivera. Director Hall.
I completely agree with the council member.
Thank you. Thank you as well. I think we have an executive committee that works very well together. I think we have a board of directors that works very well together. And I think that this board, with the input of members of the public and our riders and a top-notch staff, has improved public transit in this area. And I look forward to the opportunity to continue that good work together. All right, go ahead and please call the vote.
The motion passes with 6 members voting yes and 1 member absent.
All right, thank you very much to the executive committee for that. Item 6 is the review of the draft agenda for the October 16th board meeting. Any questions or comments on the draft agenda?
I wanted to mention to you, we will be having the COA workshop for the board. It's going to be a slightly different format. We're going to have some activities, but it will take up a lot of the time of the board meeting. So we will defer the financial sustainability plan to the November agenda to free up some time. I do believe we still have one other agenda item, which would be the DDA for 12th Imperial.
So we're ready to bring to the board the proposed disposition and development agreement for the first development next door, where we're doing our transit center expansion. That's the partnership with the San Diego Foundation. So we'll bring that. And just to note that because there's 2 weeks in between the executive committee meeting and the board meeting, there are probably a couple of additional consent items that will get finalized and added to the agenda for the 16th.
Very good. We'll look forward to that in a couple of weeks. As we move to staff or committee member communications, I will just thank the MTS staff for a terrific free ride day, which was yesterday. A lot of people, in many cases, tried transit for the first time or for the first time in a while. And I really hope that they had an opportunity to enjoy the improvements that MTS has made on the system. Staff was out at a lot of the different transit stops during the course of the day, greeting riders, and it was just a really good experience. Got a lot of media coverage. We appreciate the news media for getting the word out about the free ride day. And of course, most of all, we appreciate all the riders who took the opportunity to check it out. If there are any other communications, seeing none, then the executive committee's next meeting date will be November 13th at 9 o'clock. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.